Well, ladies and gentlemen, who would have thought that the analog horror takeover of fairy tales was ending anytime soon? Not me, and I'm sure not you either. Looks like the last video may be in need of a title change. But the creator we should all recognize by now, EXPgoat, has some more horrific retellings of classic tales that I have been itching to check out. Specifically, more entries in the Alice in Dreams story, where the supernormal and not psychedelic tale of Alice in Wonderland gets taken into a more disturbing realm, which, who am I kidding? Just about anything Alice in Wonderland related is going to have something haunting about it. Whether it be the video games, the Tim Burton nightmares, hell, even the original cartoon has nothing normal about it at all. However, the analog horror series created by EXPgoat goes the extra mile in showing off Wonderland as the hellscape it likely is, a prison created by Alice's mental disorder, going back and forth between reality, where Alice is a patient in some unhelpful psychiatric asylum, and the world of Wonderland. But that's not all we have in store for today, as there is a retelling of Hansel and Gretel I also think should be a terrifying time, considering that story isn't very happy to begin with either. So I am definitely very curious to see the direction these stories end up going. As always, be sure to check out the original videos created by EXPgoat before jumping down the 4+ rabbit hole into Wonderland. But without further ado, let's put on our psychedelic protective gear and jump back into the horrifying world of analog horror fairy tales. But before I let you get too far, just wanted to give a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, us. If you didn't know, we have a gaming channel called 4Player, where me and some of the gang terrorize ourselves with horror games. Whether it be a solo journey through a haunting indie game,
Oh my god, this is so long. Why is it so long?
or a co-op adventure that requires all of us to combine our powers.
There's no way out of here, Jonathan!
That doesn't open?
It should be a terrifying and fun time. The channel schedule has been super wonky, but more and more should start popping up on that channel in no time. So if you want some more 4+ in the realm of horror games, check out 4Player. We'll be waiting. But anyways, now you can pass through. Alice in Dreams, The White Rabbit. We open up and the first thing we are met with is this artwork looking akin to the mask Alice was wearing in the very first tape. And we are even greeted with quite the nice opening theme and title card, surely to represent the fun and peaceful time awaiting us. Besides the rabbit looking a bit not all that put together. Right off the bat, we are taken back to Alice's house. Is she really here? Probably not. But Alice is quick to notice the shadow of a rabbit that flies across the frame. She turns and sure enough, there's our rabbit, holding his signature clock. Oddly enough, this seems to be taking us back to the beginning. The rabbit runs out the red door, and after a bit of contemplating, Alice decides to go and follow. I want to mention right away that the animation has certainly taken a jump in quality, and I am all here for it, and terrified to see how it'll be utilized. Alice exits through the door, and we are met with this tunnel, and a portrait above of the original Alice in Wonderland creator, Lewis Carroll. Turns out this isn't a tunnel, but yet another hole. Who would have guessed? But then our white rabbit decides to pull a jump scare on us. Damn rabbit. However, for a brief frame, we can see the word corruption. As to be expected, Alice wakes up in a padded room, likely where she has been for quite a while. Our rabbit then returns to us, telling us that time is running out. The lights flick on and the rabbit is replaced by this creepy porcelain doll. Our rabbit returns and tells us that sanity doesn't last long in a place like this, and we're then told to dive in and find the parasite. Sounds like Wonderland is calling for us to return. We are told that we are not broken, before we get this really cool segment of Alice making her return. We are told that they miss us, and we wake back up in this hellish realm. Alice turns and sees one of the pictures is of this half-brain, half-rabbit image, and this may be a stretch, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is supposed to be a representation of her brain being pulled between the two realities, before whatever this smudge-looking goop appears in the middle. Nasty. However, the disturbing-looking door into Wonderland opens up, and Alice is seemingly pulled back in. When she opens her eyes, we are met with some familiar faces, but with different designs. What once was the dancing figure putting on a performance now holds still. And speaking of different designs, Alice now dons this pretty neat black outfit. However, our scene quickly takes a turn when the dancing figure begins to speak. They hurt me. I don't know what I'm doing here. My breathing feels wrong. My mind is breaking me apart. They're not with me anymore. And for a brief frame, the eyes begin to pop out. The mask cracks. and there's only the sound of mutilation now. I imagine since all of this is happening in Alice's head, all of this is what she is technically thinking, showing off that time has definitely not helped her, and things are only going to get worse and worse. Yet we are then told that there is a surprise waiting for us. Oh, for me? Sure enough, the curtain gets pulled back, and we are met with quite the brutal sight. What have they done to our poor rabbit? Alice looks distraught, as I'm sure anyone would be. But then we see the black tears and bloodshot eyes now on Alice. Our scene cuts out, and we are shown another medical report for Alice. In the last file we saw, Alice was 18, so quite a bit of time has seemingly passed since we were last here. We read that Alice had been placed in solitary confinement following a series of acute schizophrenic episodes. She managed to escape the facility and was later found at the bottom of a hollow cavity in the earth, bearing multiple minor injuries. She was then immediately returned to her room. It then says that it was a month ago that she was selected for the lobotomy procedure, leading me to believe that this whole story may be a reboot of some sorts, and not necessarily connected to the last two Alice tapes, which was a suspicion I had once the White Rabbit reappeared, and it seems like everything was almost retelling itself. The last paragraph of this report gets rather interesting, however. Apparently, Alice has exhibited behaviors inconsistent with her original diagnosis. Apparently, Alice appears to possess a stable and coherent mental state. It says that the lobotomy, which usually impairs motor functions and cognition, didn't produce the expected deterioration when performed on Alice. Are they trying to tell us that this was the one and only lobotomy that actually succeeded in what they were trying to do? Yeah, I don't think anyone is going to believe that, especially given the very last thing we see before this entry ends off. So there are two possibilities here so far. Either this is Alice returning to Wonderland and everything is falling apart given her mental state, and all the beings and creatures are begging for her to return because, well, without her there is no Wonderland. Or this is a retelling, and we are back in the beginning of the story experiencing things in an updated fashion, which I am also all here for. The animation and art style have gone through significant improvements, which even then, it isn't like the original tapes weren't a breath of fresh air art style-wise to begin with. But there is one more Alice tape before we are caught up, and given the title, I can't imagine this to be anything short but terrifying. Alice in Dreams, The Smiling Cat. We open up with our familiar intro, except as we can see, we now have this haunting cat staring directly into our souls. However, when we open up and see Alice, she is in a very different situation than when we last saw her. She is laying flat in this void. She wakes up and asks where she is, and claims that she feels paralyzed. She can't feel her body. And just a forewarning to all you, this cat decides to jump scare us in the worst possible way. Now, why was that a thing? Alice then says that she is suffering, and that the cat is letting her body rot, as her flesh is falling off her. The cat then tells us that we are in a trance, and that they want us to sleep, never to dream again. The cat is no longer whole, as its legs are said to be burning. I mean, the cat does not seem to be in a very good state at this moment. His face is broken, and he needs us to come back. He tells us to ask ourselves why we are here, and that he knows someone who can help us. He says that it's time to visit a wise friend. We see Alice looking a bit more like herself, and when she opens her eyes, we see an image of that damn caterpillar. This was definitely on the shorter end of all the Alice in Dreams tapes, but it does give us a bit more clues as to what is going on with her mind. I can only imagine that when the cat says they want us to sleep, never to dream again, that he's referring to either Alice's parents or just the staff at this psychiatric hospital, the ones who lobotomized her and likely pumped her full of all sorts of meds. These procedures are clearly having an adverse effect on the state of Wonderland and all of its creatures, which again are just a part of her declining mental state, further going deeper into the idea that she is being pulled back and forth from Wonderland and reality. All the creatures are being shown as falling apart. In the last report we read, it states that she was oddly showing signs of stability after the procedure, and I wouldn't be surprised if all the Wonderland characters are now desperately trying to pull her back in. Something else to mention is that it also said in the report that after the procedure, Alice was in a vegetative state for about a month. This is likely the period where everything in her Wonderland began to go through this state of dismantling, and once she awoke, everything came back full swing in an attempt to keep itself alive. Which all of this just sounds like nonsense when you remember that this is just Alice and her brain losing itself. Truly taking the psychological aspect of Alice in Wonderland and turning it up to 100. And I can only imagine a visit to that caterpillar is going to solidify which state Alice is going to remain in forever. Hansel and Gretel. It's now time to enter our second tale of the night, Hansel and Gretel. I'm sure everyone knows the story of the two siblings who find the candy house owned by the evil witch. In some tales, they escape, and in some, they just get eaten, and in some, they become witch hunters, but we don't talk about that one too much. So I'm very curious if this is going to take more of a faithful adaptation, or if we are in for some sort of disturbing retelling. The first thing we are met with is a little drawing of our two siblings. Hansel asks where their parents are, to which Gretel responds that they will come soon. However, a different face slowly fades into the background, with text that just reads, "I am hungry." After our title card, we then see a more detailed depiction of Gretel, and then Hansel. The two traverse the woods together, likely lost and still unsure of where their parents are. Our scene then turns red, and again, the text "hungry" appears on screen. We then only see Hansel, staring off frame, and Gretel pulls quite the eerie move, quickly appearing next to him. What is it they are looking at? Well, it's the famous candy house. Immediately, the two begin eating off of the house. Disrespectful bastards. Gretel helps herself to a lollipop, while Hansel is chowing down on a piece of chocolate. We keep cutting closer and closer to them enjoying the treats, before they then knock on the door, and when it opens, we don't see anybody. However, we do hear quite the horrifying voice ask if we want some cookies, cakes, lollipops, the whole shebang.
Would you like some cookies? You look hungry.
After seeing that horrifying design, which I can only imagine is the witch, I have no idea why these two thought it was a good idea to enter. Sure enough, the door shuts behind them, and we can see all the neat treats laid around. Alright, I'm convinced. We see this horrifying visual of the witch hiding behind the treats, only to be seen by their teeth and eyes. The first treat offered to us is strawberry cake, and we don't only eat the cake, but the whole plate too. We do the same thing with the cookie. However, our third dish is definitely something to say the least, and of course, it's the witch's favorite.
The following is my favorite one.
After that nightmare, we see Gretel just laying in bed, and for a few brief frames, we see blood on the bed next to her, where you would think Hansel would be. Gretel ends up leaving the room and walks through this bizarre staircase setup you'd think you'd see at Hogwarts. However, what Gretel sees next is something I'm going to be having nightmares about, I'm just sure of it.
Sorry, Gretel. I was hungry.
Gretel is horrified at what has been told to her, and we end up getting a full look at what I don't even think is a witch anymore. Whatever it is says again that Hansel will not return, before completely distorting with the sounds of screams in the back, barely being able to make out the teeth eating on poor Hansel. However, the very last thing we see on this tape completely changes the story entirely. We are back in the woods, with Gretel covered in blood, leading me to believe that just like Alice in Dreams, a lot of what we just saw wasn't real, and there was no witch or candy house. Just two siblings who got lost in the woods and were driven mad with hunger, and in a haunting turn of events, leads to Gretel being the one to eat Hansel. It sounds like the plot of Madagascar if you ask me. Each of these entries just goes to show that the possibilities remain endless when it comes to fairy tale retellings in a horror setting. The continuation of Alice in Dreams further diving deeper into her crumbling sanity was definitely a blast. I especially enjoy seeing how it ends up affecting the world of Wonderland and all of its inhabitants, showing that they would obviously not want Alice's brain to ever be fixed, because then that would leave Wonderland non-existent. I also can't help but mention that the quality had vastly improved, especially in the animation. Seeing Alice move around more realistically in those quick moments is really neat to see, and it makes me all the more excited to see how much more the future tapes will continue to improve. And then we had the disturbing retelling of Hansel and Gretel, which appears to be a faithful tale all the way up until the last second, with the disturbing reveal that there was no witch at all, just the pure horrors of starvation and what that can drive a person to do. Both instances seem to have similar themes of our characters slowly losing their minds. Alice is a case where the procedure she is enduring is definitely making everything a whole lot worse for her, and goes on to show just how poorly those with her conditions were treated back in the day. And hell, even now. At least we don't lobotomize people anymore. I hope. Whereas Hansel and Gretel took a more graphic approach, where Gretel was literally driven to the point of such desperation that she ate her own brother. I can't think of any telling of that story that ends in that fashion. Even though the witch ended up not being real, the design of it was especially terrifying. Probably one of the more harrowing depictions I have seen. Truly, the level of creativity was on full display here. However, that'll probably be about it for this video. If you haven't already, be sure to check out the original videos to support the creators so that we can get more of these psychological nightmares. And as always, be sure to keep on leaving us recommendations down below, whether it be in the YouTube comments or the community Discord, where we have all kinds of endless treats for you to eat. But on that note, I am getting a little hungry, and that candy house I see in the distance is really sounding appetizing.